The most terrified I've ever been in my life happened on what should have been the most ordinary morning. My best friend Chloe owns this little boutique in our downtown. It's cozy, filled with plants in the window, racks of colorful dresses, the faint scent of lavender candles she always keeps burning near the register. It's the kind of place you wander into just to feel calm. But that morning it felt like a trap. Chloe called me at 7 in the morning, voice shaking. She said, "Can you please come watch the shop for a couple hours?" I have to be in court. I thought she meant jury duty or traffic court. I was half asleep, sipping coffee, and said, "Sure, no problem." Then she added, "I'm filing for a restraining order against Wilson." Wilson had been her employee for almost a year. He started out charming, always the first to arrive and the last to leave, the kind of guy who remembered customers' names. But over time, Chloe noticed cash missing from the till, items disappearing, customers complaining about his temper. When she confronted him, he snapped. He threw a stack of hangers across the room, screamed at her, and shoved her so hard she hit the wall. That was last week. She fired him, obviously, changed the locks. But he wouldn't stop calling, showing up outside, sending texts that veered between apologies and threats. "You'll regret this. We'll talk soon. You don't know who you're messing with." So that morning, Chloe was headed to court, and she wanted me in the shop as a precaution. When I got there at 9, she was pale, jittery. She showed me the panic button hidden under the counter, explained how the lock worked from the inside, reminded me not to open the door unless I recognized the person. Her hands shook as she demonstrated the double latch. I joked, "You've got this set up like Fort Knox." She didn't laugh. "I'll be back by noon," she said. "Just, you don't let anyone in unless you have to. And if you see Wilson, call 911 immediately." I promised I would. She hugged me like she might never see me again, and left. For the first hour, it was peaceful. I straightened a few displays, dusted the counter, tried to act like this was just another Saturday. A couple of regulars knocked on the glass, and I let them in one at a time, locking the door behind them. Every time I turned the key, I felt the weight of what Chloe had said. Around 10:30, I started to relax. I put on music, folded scarves, even texted Chloe a picture of the shop saying, "Still standing." She didn't reply, but I figured she was in court. Then, just before 11, I saw him. Wilson. He was leaning against a lamppost across the street, smoking a cigarette. He wasn't looking at his phone, wasn't pretending to be busy. He was just staring at the store. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up. I ducked behind a rack of dresses and peeked through the hangers. It was him. Same jacket, same crooked posture, same face Chloe had shown me in photos to be sure I'd recognize him. I texted her immediately. "He's here." No response. I debated calling the police right then, but what would I even say? A guy is standing outside smoking? They'd never get there in time. Wilson flicked his cigarette away and started walking toward the shop. Not quickly, not angrily. Just this slow, casual stroll, like he had all the time in the world. I rushed to the counter, checked the lock again, my heart pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it from outside. He walked right up to the glass door and knocked. 3 times, lightly, like a customer. I froze. He leaned close to the glass, grinning, and mouthed, "Open up." I shook my head. The grin didn't fade. If anything, it widened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something shiny, Chloe's car keys. He dangled them, then pulled out her wallet. Then he pointed down the street like he wanted me to follow. I felt cold all over. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Wilson must have seen me because he pulled out his own phone and held it up to the glass. On the screen was a photo of Chloe's car, the windshield completely smashed in. Then, slowly, almost theatrically, he pulled a crowbar out of his hoodie. The first hit against the glass made a sound I'll never forget. A deep, sickening thud, followed by cracks spiderwebbing across the surface. I whispered into the phone, "There's a man trying to break into my friend's boutique. He's armed with a crowbar. Please send someone fast." The dispatcher's voice was calm, steady. "Officers are on their way. Stay where you are. Don't engage." Wilson hit the door again. And again. Shards began falling onto the floor inside. I slammed the panic button under the counter. A piercing alarm went off, loud enough to make my ears ring. Wilson didn't flinch. He just laughed, lifted the crowbar, and smashed until there was a hole big enough to reach through. I grabbed a display pole, the flimsy kind meant for hanging scarves, and swung it at his arm when he tried to undo the lock. He barely flinched, just growled, "Wrong move." Then the lock gave way. He shoved the door open, shards crunching under his boots, and stepped inside like he owned the place. Up close, he smelled like beer and sweat. His eyes were bloodshot, his grin feral. He tapped the crowbar against his palm. "Where's the money?" he asked, like we were having a normal conversation. I stammered something about not knowing the code to the safe. He pressed the crowbar against my throat and shoved me against the counter. The metal was cold, pressing harder until I could barely breathe. "Try harder," he said. I punched random numbers into the register, the beeping filling the air, my vision blurring as black spots danced at the edges. Somewhere outside, sirens wailed faintly. Wilson heard them too. His face twisted with rage. He raised the crowbar above his head. I thought, this is it. This is how I die. But instinct took over. I twisted sideways and swung the pole as hard as I could. It clashed against the crowbar with a screech of metal on metal. Wilson snarled, shoved me backward into a display case that shattered beneath me, glass slicing into my hip. I screamed. He lunged again, but his boot slid on the broken glass. For a split second, he lost balance, and the crowbar clattered out of his hand. The sirens were deafening now. Red and blue lights flashed across the broken glass door. "Drop the weapon!" a voice boomed. 3 officers rushed in, guns drawn. Wilson roared like an animal, tried to fight, but they tackled him hard. The sound of him hitting the glass and floor was sickening. They wrestled the cuffs on while he screamed about how Chloe owed him money, how she had ruined his life. And then, just like that, it was over. I slid down the wall, trembling so hard my teeth chattered. My hands were sticky with blood from the cuts. My throat throbbed where the crowbar had pressed. Paramedics swarmed me, checking vitals, shining lights in my eyes, pressing gauze against my wounds. Someone asked if I wanted to go to the hospital. I just kept nodding, unable to form words. Chloe finally called. She was sobbing in a courthouse bathroom, saying she'd just gotten the restraining order granted when she saw my texts. She rushed over, hugged me so tightly I thought I'd break. The police showed us photos they'd taken of her car. Wilson had smashed it to pieces before coming for the store. The rest of the day blurred into a haze of paperwork, statements, antiseptic smells at the hospital, and a dull ache that spread through my whole body. But it didn't end there. Wilson made bail within a week. He was fitted with a GPS monitor, but that didn't stop the nightmares. Every night I woke up convinced he was standing outside my window. I stayed at Chloe's place. We pushed furniture against the door, jumped at every sound. I started self-defense classes carrying pepper spray, checking every mirror when I walked down the street. Chloe upgraded the store with cameras, reinforced glass, extra panic buttons. Court dragged on for months. Wilson showed up in a cheap suit, glaring at us like he still held the crowbar in his hand. Testifying against him was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My voice shook, my palms sweated. But I told the truth. How he had come for us, how he had tried to kill me. The judge eventually sentenced him to years behind bars. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like relief. Relief that maybe, finally, I could breathe again. Chloe and I rebuilt the shop together, every broken shelf replaced, every crack patched. Customers slowly returned, but nothing was the same. When I walk in now, I still see the glass exploding, still hear the crowbar hitting the door. I still feel the cold metal pressing into my throat. But I also remember the moment I fought back. The sound of police rushing in. The fact that I survived. And maybe that's the part I hold on to. Because the truth is, survival doesn't feel heroic. It just feels like living with scars. But those scars mean I'm still here.